Hi everyone, welcome back. Before we proceed into the medical pavilion, I thought it might be worth talking about Bioshock's core gameplay. Surprisingly, for a first-person shooter, combat isn't the core feature of Bioshock's gameplay. Nope, it's picking things up. Seriously, if you play games the way I play them, with a stopwatch and a spreadsheet sitting next to you, you'll quickly realise that the amount of time you spend engaged in combat with enemies is dwarfed by the amount of time you spend scavenging through rooms looking for supplies. So, because picking things up is the most important part of Bioshock, it makes sense that it would be a finely tuned, well thought out mechanic. But it's not. To really appreciate why, let's compare Bioshock's picking up stuff mechanics with that of one of its spiritual predecessors, System Shock 2. System Shock 2 came out in 1999 and was one of the main sources of inspiration for Bioshock. In System Shock, you explored a spaceship while you killed aliens with guns and psychic powers. But the game also had heavier role-playing elements. Players could distribute points to specialise in several different areas of expertise, such as weapon skills, psychic powers, hacking skills, or research skills. In addition to having many areas of expertise, the game also has a large number and variety of items that can be found. In addition to weapons and ammo, there's also repair kits for weapons and other items on the ship, chemicals required for research, injectables for providing temporary status boosts, and simple cosmetic items that offer no utility purpose, such as mugs, plants, magazines, and even a game player. All your items share a limited inventory space, and this is where System Shock's picking up mechanics are superior. Because of the large variety of items and the range of potential builds you can select, every item you pick up has a certain amount of strategic weight behind it. As a player, you're going to have to make trade-offs. Which weapons do you carry? How much ammo do you carry for them? Is it worth carrying around normal and armor-piercing rounds? Are these items helpful to my build? Do I have enough space to carry this item, or will I need to drop something? These are all factors that need to be considered whenever you find an item in System Shock. It's for this reason that scavenging items in System Shock requires the player to look at the item and press a button in order to pick it up. Instead of just going the standard FPS route, having items sucked into your possession as you run over them. The items are hidden throughout the level. You need to take time and effort attempting to uncover them. And when you do find them, you need to make a decision on whether that item is something that's worth picking up. Compare that to Bioshock's system. Outside of the consumables that make a trade-off between health or Eve, such as alcohol or cigarettes, there is no downside to picking up every single item that you find. You can only carry at most one of each weapon, and each weapon has its own pool of ammunition. You'll never be forced to make a trade-off. At no point will you have to consider, for instance, if you should drop some medkits so you can carry more armor-piercing shotgun rounds, or drop the grenade launcher in favour of carrying more Eve hypos, or any other trade-off. Bioshock's item system is an empty system that requires no player thought or skill, and yet it consumes a large amount of the player's playtime. It pads the game length while adding nothing meaningful to the game. Back in the medical pavilion, a security bot blocks our access through a door we need to get through, so that we can learn about hacking. And much like real-life hacking, hacking in Bioshock requires rerouting pipes to make information datagrams move where you want them to. Actually, this hacking minigame did have some in-universe explanation at one point in the game's development. At one time, everything in Rapture was controlled by living organisms that all required Adam to survive. Adam was the literal lifeblood of Rapture, rather than the metaphorical but not really lifeblood of Rapture. Hacking was supposed to be the player increasing the flow of Adam to the creature controlling the machine, which would then offer benefits to the player in return. As we make our way through Rapture, it's worth remembering that Rapture was the scene of a violent civil war. The level tries to communicate this to you through the numerous scenes of destruction littered throughout the level. The problem is, it all feels artificial. It's spread too neatly and evenly. It's as though they built the level first, they just combed over it adding destruction artifacts wherever they felt that they were necessary. Knock over furniture, add a corpse, put in a leak, add another corpse, damage a handrail, another corpse, pepper some bullet holes in the wall, tilted a sign, tilted a sign, tilted a sign, tilted a sign, smeared some blood, add a corpse, and tilt a sign. At some points it gets downright silly, like here. There's a corpse dropped next to a streak of blood, beside an overturned wheelchair. First off, the wheelchair makes no sense, because there's only stairs here. There's no wheelchair access, just like the rest of Rapture. There's a gap in the hand railing where it's been cleanly blown away, but there's no wreckage, and no sign of any damage done to the medical pavilion sign directly behind it. The sign isn't on an angle due to any structural damage, it's just because the chains holding up the sign aren't the same length. Plus there's no bullet holes or shell casings here, or even any scuff marks or scorch marks. But what's really wrong isn't the damage that is present, it's the damage that's absent. Most buildings that happen to be around civil wars when they happen tend to suffer some amount of damage. Rapture had a civil war take place entirely inside of it. A civil war where weapons and ammunition could be attained by anyone via vending machines, and where most of the populace was in possession of destructive superpowers. When you think about it, the city seems remarkably damage-free. The ceilings didn't seem to get too damaged from any stray bullets or plasmid misfires, or even any smoke damage from any of the fires that no doubt cropped up. The power grid also remained intact and functional. Everywhere in Rapture is well lit, and not just from emergency lights or makeshift light sources. All the bright neon signs are still fully operational, like Rapture was always open for business. The ventilation and air conditioning also remained up, since Jack doesn't die from oxygen deprivation or exposure upon arrival. And perhaps most damning of all, despite the city being filled with scenic glass walls, windows and ceilings, and despite the airlocks being sparsely located between major areas, the entire city wasn't structurally compromised and flooded. Also, the actions of Rapture's inhabitants don't really resonate with the idea of a civil war either. Resources become scarce during such conflicts, and the entire city is closed off from the outside world. Everyone would be desperately trying to scavenge as many supplies as they could manage. They'd try to secure them in safe places, or in hidden caches. Strategically valuable areas of the city would be occupied and fortified. Barricades would be constructed, especially around the airlocks since they'd provide useful choke points in any prolonged conflict. People would group up in bases so they could guard each other and defend themselves. They'd head out in groups on patrols, or raids, or in scavenger missions. But in Bioshock, none of this has happened. The splices are scattered randomly, unorganized around the city. They have nothing to do until Jack arrives to murder them. Useful supplies are left scattered around in plain sight. It makes no sense. Jack is able to hoard enough supplies to support a small army just by picking up things he found lying around the place, and yet there's splicers running around trying to defend themselves with metal pipes. Another regular feature of Bioshock's level design is the in-game tutorial elements. Based on the feedback received from System Shock, that it was difficult and inaccessible, Irrational decided that in Bioshock, any new feature, weapon or plasmid, given to the player should be immediately demonstrated so that the player can become familiar with it before progressing. We've already seen this being used, with the player being required to use the wrench, lightning bolt, and hacking in order to progress through the game. But as it goes on, things become even less believable. When you pick up the infernal plasmid, for instance, a group of splicers immediately materialise into the room to stand in a conveniently placed pool of oil, so they can burn them all to death. But it's far from the worst example. For instance, there's this. So far we've encountered a couple of safes that we've had to hack in order to open. But now we come across something even more secure. Unhackable locks that require a combination. The player needs to utilise their awesome powers of investigation in order to locate the combination that someone conveniently wrote down on a piece of paper just over here. And what's the big treasure that required an unhackable lock to store? Shoes. There's a civil war going on. People are being violently murdered everywhere. And the people who own the funeral parlour decided that of all the things they owned that might require security, money, plasmids, atom, weapons. They decided that shoes were the thing that needed secure storage. Heh. I bet it was the wife's decision. Am I right, fellas? Oh god, I'm so lonely. But the worst example of this demonstrate-as-you-go features in the medical pavilion is this scripted sequence, designed to familiarise players with the complicated workings of the shotgun. Some splicers have set a trap for Jack. When he picks up the shotgun, they hit the lights and ambush him. Clever splicers. Except that, you know, of all the things to use as bait for your trap, did you really think a weapon that's superior to your own was the best choice? Not only that, but one that was left loaded, and which had a couple of boxes of ammo left next to it as well, just in case the loaded rounds weren't enough. Doing things this way is problematic for a few reasons. First of all, it forces linearity onto your levels, since you're requiring the player to learn about a feature before they encounter a more difficult means of utilising it. Second of all, when it comes to tone, this makes the level feel safer and less hostile. You'll never encounter anything that hasn't been gently introduced to you beforehand. You, as a player, will never be faced with the unknown, which is a big part of what goes into invoking fear in the player. On that note, third, it infringes on player autonomy. Instead of the player discovering and exploring things in this environment on their own, everything is spoon-fed to them. While it makes things easier, it also denies the player the feeling of victory that comes from overcoming the challenge on their own. And finally, it violates other established parts of the game. In order for these in-game lessons to work, Rapture needs to be safe, predictable, and linear. And the splicers need to act like reckless, unintelligible morons. The ultimate goal for the medical pavilion level is to retrieve a key from the mad Dr. Steinman, so you can open a door to gain access to Neptune's bounty. As you travel through the level, several audio logs give you insight into Steinman's fall into madness that eventually led to him butchering his patients. The game tries to add depth to this by making numerous references to the Holocaust. It likens the actions committed by Steinman to that of Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, and the numerous cases of human experimentation that he committed in the Nazi concentration camps. Steinman is a German name, and both him and Mengele look somewhat similar. The crucified patients imply a religious angle, likening Steinman to Mengele's Angel of Death alias. The medical pavilion also has a few scenes containing concentration camp type imagery. Apart from the mutilated corpses, there are numerous tiled medical rooms, a room that fills with gas, a crematorium where corpses are burned, and an audio log where Dr. Tenenbaum recounts her own experiences in the German concentration camps and the experiments conducted within. The reference is clearly there, but why? Bioshock seems to be trying to imply that an objective society would end up like Nazi Germany did, with people committing acts of human mutilation. But the reference doesn't hold up. Mengele had the full support of the Nazi regime, which allowed him to do what he did. Steinman, on the other hand, was just one guy who went murderously crazy, in a city full of other people who also went murderously crazy. It's a shallow reference. It muddles the game's intended message and adds no depth to the setting or the storyline. Following Steinman's execution, he peacefully walked down a hallway, just as a dead Big Daddy, no doubt destroyed by some super strong splicer, flies across the corridor. As you enter the room, a cutscene takes over so you can experience some more story. The splicer is going after a little sister. The Tenenbaum shoots the splicer dead with a pistol before it can do anything. Tenenbaum and Atlas then exchange dialogue, and Tenenbaum gives you the rescue plasmid, allowing you to rescue the little sisters instead of harvesting them. They then both leave you alone to decide if you want to rescue or harvest the little sister before you can progress. Okay, that was kinda stupid. Let's consider the characters. Tenenbaum originally helped with the creation of the little sisters, and wants to rescue them. Her shooting the splicer makes sense, as does her giving you the rescue tonic, and asking you to spare the children. Her most realistic course of action at this point would be to keep the pistol aimed at you, while she continues to try to persuade you to rescue the little sister. But instead of doing that, she decides to leave you alone with the little sister, after having said her piece. So she decides to just wait it out and see if you harvest the child that she's already murdered one person and try and save. And she's left you knowing full well that Atlas is talking to Jack and that he's 100% on the pro-harvest side of things. And while we're on the topic of Atlas/Fontaine, his actions are much better. Remember, Jack is his pawn, which he plans to use to murder Ryan in order to take control of Rapture. Jack having more Adam would make this process easier, since he'd be able to fare better against the splicers. And Fontaine is in possession of a magic phrase which he can use to get Jack to do anything he wants. But he doesn't use it. I originally thought that this was because Jack might realise he was under mind control if Atlas forced him to do something barbaric, like harvest a child. But remember, Would You Kindly was what got Jack to crash a plane full of innocent people and himself into the ocean at the start of the game. If there was any flaw in the mind control conditioning related to self-harm or harming innocents, apparently crashing a plane isn't enough to set it off. The actions of these characters makes no sense, and these are supposed to be two of the better written characters in this game. Almost everyone else is just crazy, which is just a lazy way to write a character when you don't want to give them any depth or reason for their actions. Why do all the splicers attack you on sight? It's because they're crazy. Why do they leave shotgun traps laying around the place? They're crazy. Why does Steinman butcher people? He's crazy. Why does this splicer attack the bathysphere? It's crazy. Oh well. It's just a game. Story isn't really that important, I guess. I mean, it's not like anyone factored that into their reviews or anything. Right? The story that exists and unfolds inside the most convincing and elaborate and artistic game world ever conceived. Active entertainment versus passive, I know which I prefer. 10 out of 10. Here's a game that serves as the perfect counterpoint to film critic Roger Everett's notorious assertion that games ain't art if you care about such crap. A+. Few games affect the player on this level. The atmosphere, the water, the story, the architecture, and the perfectly defined abs all come together to create one of the greatest experiences of this console generation. 9.5 out of 10. To put it simply, Bioshock is a brilliant game. Its emotionally jarring denizens and its compelling and seamless narrative pushes you willingly forward from chapter to chapter. A real page-turner. Masterpiece, 10 out of 10. Bioshock is a great and wondrous adventure told through an imaginative story combining several genres to add appeal and flavor for a truly fun game. 10 out of 10. It's the storyline and the player's experience of it that mark Bioshock's greatest strength. Initially it seems like the cliched kill the big bad guy plot that supported almost every FPS ever created, but the storyline runs much deeper in its observations of objectivism and its implications. 5 stars out of 5. Bioshock is a rare game where the plot, environment, and combat are all steps above the normal video game experience. Engrossing plot. Hey. The curve on this toy is slightly extreme in my opinion, but those ridges feel wonderful. 8 out of 10. The reason that Bioshock's story is so great is that the player feels like a contributing factor to the story, not just a passive observer. 9.8 out of 10. Excellent. Throughout your lengthy stay, you'll find options for combat as intricate and enjoyable as the story and characters are to your interpretation, something that only a handful of games can ever claim to offer. Bioshock features one of the most compelling plots I've ever seen in a game, a brilliantly measured story delivered at the perfect pace. 10 out of 10, flawless victory. Neptune's Bounty's up next. See you next time.
Now you've had the pleasure of Andrew Ryan's